Well, today we are going to talk about robberies and burglaries. The investigative principles behind robberies and burglaries. Let's see. We should probably define it first. That would be the best way. And we'll probably talk about robberies first and then talk about burglaries. One of the more common, you probably heard me use this example if you've taken any of my other classes, one of the more common phrases that we hear in the criminal justice world, just in life, is you tell folks, you hear folks talk about my house got robbed. What does somebody think of when they hear my house got robbed? What literally happened to their house? I'm sorry? Property stolen, they got burglarized. Yeah, they got their house broken into. When somebody says my house got robbed, are you thinking they were home or not home?
No.
Not home? Is that fairly common? My house got robbed. What we're going to learn today is that in general, with very few exceptions, one's house cannot get robbed. Like Miss Ariano said, you heard me that time? All right. I'm speaking out loud. Like it was said, the house got burglarized. We usually bifurcate crimes into property crimes and crimes against persons or violent crimes. Those are two of our primary categories. And if somebody says my house got robbed, and robbery is usually a violent crime or a crime against person, it'd be very difficult for the house, which is not a person, to get robbed. People get robbed. Houses get burglarized. So, with that in mind, how are we going to define a robbery? What do we need to do? What if you're going to rob somebody, put yourselves in the shoes of a robber, a robbery suspect. You know, actually, let's just paint a scenario. Mr. Young, give me a robbery scenario. Give me a story in which a robbery occurs.
Person walks into a gas station.
Person walks into a gas station, pointing the gun at, who are they pointing the gun at? The cashier, and asked for all the money. They asked for it. They're very polite, robber. They didn't demand it, but they asked. If they ask and say, please, is it still a robbery? You think that? Okay, we'll come back to that. There we go. So, yep, we'll keep it up. We'll go, Ms. Earhart. Give me another scenario. Another robbery, but it does not involve a gas station.
Okay.
Tell me a story.
So I'm walking down the street in New York City, got my purse,
Okay.
and someone comes up behind me, snatches it.
Snatches your purse.
Yes. And runs.
And then runs.
Yes.
Okay. You've spun a gray area in robbery. So I want to come back to that gray area because we may have robbery, we might not. And we're going to figure out why in a second. Oh man, I'm messing up because you don't have masks. You're laughing?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Lucy. Yes, all right. I'm really thrown off. Lucy, tell me another story that doesn't involve New York City or a gas station. That is a robbery. Not one that you've committed. How about walking down the street? Well, can I prompt you? Can I start you, or do you have something in mind?
No, you can start.
Okay. All right. Do you want to be the robber or the victim in this story? The victim. Okay, you are walking down the street with a clear plastic bag of jewels, and you're walking like this because that's how you walk. That's how you walk with your jewels. You're walking down the street, down the sidewalk, busy street with those jewels. Tell me a story about how you can get robbed that way. We already said it's a gray area if somebody comes up and snatches it, so let's do more.
Somebody just comes and punches you and just takes it or something.
There we go. Okay, so
I did.
punches you,
Yeah, I had an issue like that at one of my shops. A lady sells jewelry.
and she walks like this.
No.
Oh.
She just has a tray and she sells jewelry like that. She just takes it out in public there at the Herbalife shop and she just sells it. just went in there to see what, spot the area, came back out, went in there with a ski mask and. Okay.
Back before masks were cool. And then how did they, and so they came in with the ski mask and what? What happened?
So everything just ran up to her and just grabbed it and ran out.
Okay.
They didn't hurt her or anything.
Did they say anything to her? Okay. So now we have two gray areas. We have a little, well, your story with getting punched in the face, not great. I'm gonna call that a robbery. I'm gonna call that the gas station a robbery. But we got Herbalife and New York City, a little gray. So Jason mentioned some force or fear. I'll come back to you then. Do you agree with me that Mr. Young's scenario is a robbery? Do you agree? Okay. And do you agree with me? It's a good bet to agree with me on this one. Do you agree with me that getting punched in the face in her scenario and then having your clear bag of jewels taken from you is robbery? All right.
Yeah.
I feel like as long as there's force.
I'm all ears.
I kind of think it's a robbery. I don't know.
Which one?
What's in the bag?
Punch in the face, taking the bag.
The story she said.
Where were you when in your story? You're walking down the street? Because I think I started that story, right? You're walking down the street.
Okay, then it was wrong.
Okay.
I think her was dead.
You think hers is theft?
Yeah.
And then where was, so inside the Herbalife store was the lady selling the jewelry, is that right? Or in front? Inside the store, okay. Let's find out in a second. We're gonna touch on the definition of burglary, but I'm willing to hear your argument for it. So you said that it was definitely, the gas station is definitely a robbery. Is there anybody who doesn't think that the punch facing bag grabbing guy is a robber? Is there anybody who wants to argue against that? Okay, anybody else? Walking down the street, punches the bag holder in the face, snatches the bag and runs. We all agree that's a robbery then? Or we're afraid to talk?
Assault robbery?
I'm sorry?
Assault robbery?
We definitely have an assault. We definitely have a burglary. I'm sorry, not a burglary. We definitely have an assault. We definitely have a battery because it was a completed assault. An assault is usually colloquially, we can call it assault an attempted battery. If I swing at you, that's an assault. If I hit you, that's a battery in general, with a few exceptions depending on the jurisdiction. But in general, the act of swinging at you is going to be the assault. And the act of actually connecting is going to be the battery. So that's why sometimes they're assault and battery. But do we really need the assault to be a crime if you actually finish the crime? In most jurisdictions, you're gonna hear it's just a battery. In the same way that we'll talk about some of what we're quickly gonna talk about. How about this? If I shoot you, you die, and I take your wallet. Is that a robbery? Or sorry, did I steal from you? Am I gonna get arrested for that theft? Probably not. That's a homicide, right? So we really care about how. In the same way, a battery, the completed assault, is going to be the battery. That's what we're. Now, the two gray stories. Well, the first one was walking down the street, holding a purse, and the purse gets snatched away from you. Some would call that a purse snatch. Almost the literal definition of a purse snatch. But is it a robbery? So let's find out what we need to have a robbery, and then we can come back to that. All right. The very key element of robbery. What does a robber want? Stuff, money, possessions. They want the stuff that somebody else has, right? So they want to take property. Now there's a minor element to taking property that comes after that. Because so does he possess that stapler? Yeah, he possesses that stapler. Leave it on the booth. So if I come and I grab the stapler like this, do I also possess the stapler? Yeah, I've taken the stapler, but I haven't moved it away. But we don't have the element of a robbery yet. Because I've taken it, he's not the only possessor right now. Until I move it away, now it's just mine. So, thank you. Taking and moving away. The property of another. So we're going to take away property, moving away. The property of another. That one I just want to give to you because it would take a little while to come up with that. But essentially, you may have heard an example was the defense in, I believe it was the OJ case, when OJ did go to jail, or did actually get found guilty. He was found guilty in, I think it was Nevada, for robbery. The defense was that he was taking his own possessions back. He used whatever means that he used in that time to get the possessions that he rightfully owned to get them back. So his defense was that the robbery was not met, the elements of robbery were not met. Yeah, he took property, moved it away, but it wasn't the property of another. It turned out to be, the defense is imperfect, it didn't work, but that was his defense. So in order to have the elements of robbery, we need to take the property, move it away, and the property has to be the property of another. I believe it was Jason that said, through the use of force or fear. What does that mean to you?
Like they must be either threatened or physically hurt by someone, right?
Threatened or physically hurt. That's a decent definition. The idea that you have to either threaten to do them harm or do them harm, or use force on them in order to take that property. So, back to the stapler. The stapler is sitting here, doesn't matter how much it's worth, it is the property of another. That belongs, that might be Mrs. Sullivan's stapler. Well, I want a stapler, I don't have a stapler, so I take it. She's not even here today. She has no idea that I took her stapler. Is it still a crime? Did I commit a crime? Yeah, absolutely. I stole from Mrs. Sullivan. That's a crime. It's depending on the jurisdiction, larceny, theft, grand theft, petty theft, whatever it falls under. It is some sort of theft crime. It is against the law for me to take something that's not mine. Did I rob Mrs. Sullivan? Why?
She wasn't present.
That's part of it. So if she's not present, then what can't happen?
We can't hurt her.
She can't be hurt or threatened or forced. She had no idea. Taking the property of another, moving it away through the use of force or fear. And your book has one more definition that not all jurisdictions have. With no intent to return, sometimes called with the intent to permanently deprive. The intent to permanently deprive. You'll see that element in a lot of theft crimes in different jurisdictions. You'll see it commonly in auto theft crimes, the difference between joyriding and trying to get joyriding and jaywalking confused. Joyriding and GTA, or auto theft and GTA. One is taking the car of another with the intent to permanently deprive, and one is the taking of the car of another where you can't show that there's intent to permanently deprive, you just took it. Two different crimes in some jurisdictions. How can we show that there's an intent to permanently deprive it? If we're an investigator and we're trying to investigate robbery or even I'll go back to my example with the car auto theft. As investigators, how are you going to show that the person who took that car intended to permanently deprive the owner of that car? Which means never give it back. We can think something, we can be extreme about it. What if When you take that car, a common trend in auto theft is to take the car to commit other crimes. You don't want to use your own car to commit crimes, so you steal somebody else's car. And then when you're done committing those crimes, you don't want your fingerprints or DNA to be found, so what can you do to that car? You can dump it in the river. You can set it on fire. If you dump it in the river and you set it on fire, are you going to go back in the river and give it back to the owner later? No, you intend to permanently deprive them of that car. They're out of luck. So those are examples of how you can show as an investigator when you're filing cases that, oh, see, that you're going to show the prosecutor they intended to permanently deprive, so we have this crime. Or in this case, in the jurisdictions that the book's talked about, for robbery, you show. So now we took, in Mr. Young's example, they went to the gas station, they went to the Circle K and robbed the Circle K cashier of the money. How can we show that they never intended to give that money back? They left with it and they spent it. You spend the money, you're never giving it back, right? There you go. That's an easy way. Taking the property and moving it away, the property of another, through the use of force or fear upon that person, with the intent to permanently deprive them of that property. Now, let's go to the Herbalife scenario. Let's recap that. We've got a woman inside the store with a tray full of jewelry, not affiliated with the store, right?
She was one of the operators.
What does that
She
mean?
was working there.
She was working there, and that's like her side hustle was the tray? Okay. So she got a tray, jewels on the tray, jewelry on the tray. Person comes in, scopes it out, leaves, comes back with a mask. Before masks were cool, and snatches the jewelry off the tray or takes the whole tray. Takes the whole tray and runs out. Do we have a robbery?
So they have to
No,
have all
because it
five
wasn't
there?
affecting the person.
That's a really good question. I'm glad you asked that. Thank you for bringing that up, because I did not say that. Jason just asked, do you have to have all 5 of these elements? Absolutely. When you talk about elements of the crime, if you're missing one element, you don't have that crime. Doesn't mean you don't have a crime. You don't have that crime. And that is crucial. You'll hear that in jury instructions during a trial. The whole point of a trial is to prove, as a prosecutor, they're literally going to have this checklist. And they're going to go down that checklist with the jury as they prove their case. If we're going to use the Circle K, the gas station, the prosecutor is going to show that whoever it is that he came in, they took that money after they asked nicely for it. But they used force or fear, took the money. They came in, demanded it or asked for it, but pointed a gun and said that a reasonable person is going to be scared because a gun was pointed at them. Mr. Young, you said they had a gun, right? They had a gun. They asked for the money, and a reasonable person who's so scared is going to give them that money. So they took the money. They got it in their hand and they drove away, and it wasn't their money to begin with. They're going to show that they didn't bring that money in, and then they spent that money. And then at the end of the trial, the prosecutor is going to go through that checklist again in their closing arguments, and they're going to say, look at this, jury. Every single one of those boxes is checked. You have no choice but to convict. I literally showed you every single element of robbery, and I showed you how the defendant fulfilled every single one of those elements. How can you not convict? They're literally checked. So yes, every element has to be. Now, with the Herbalife tray bandit, the Herbalife tray bandit came in, scoped it out, left, put on a mask, came back, took the tray and ran away. Is there any doubt that they took property in this story? We're just going to go down the list. Anybody want to disagree that they took property? That's the easy one. Did they move that property away? They left it. Was it their property? The bandit didn't belong to them. Did you think they had any goal in mind of ever giving that property back? Did they force the tray possessor, the one who put that tray up, was there any force or fear involved?
Maybe fear.
Fear. Tell me about the fear.
Obviously, you would be scared. It wasn't just your average mask.
Right? And I don't disagree that perhaps that is a scary situation. But the element of the crime in this case is not that fear was caused. You took the property through the use of force or fear. A sub-element or a side effect of fear being involved is not an element of the crime. You have to use that fear in order to get there. We don't know, in this story, we don't know if she had her back turned, if she saw the person, even if she did see the person, if they didn't say anything to her to instill that fear, or point a gun or a weapon, or cock a fist, or something to instill fear into this victim, they're just taking. We absolutely have a crime. But I'm going to have a hard time getting a case filed as an investigator for robbery in that particular case. We're kind of going back to that situation where I said a house can't get robbed. We have a victim. We at least have some sort of theft, whatever we want to call it in this jurisdiction. It's going to be a larceny, a theft, a petty theft, a grand theft, something. But I'm having a hard time calling that robbery. So that was a great example. Thank you. Now, yes.
So for a robbery, you have to use the fear / force to, how would you word that? To commit the crime, to
fulfill the elements. You have to take the property of another, move it away through the use of force or fear with the intent to permanently deprive. Now, even grayer is Zoe's example of the purse snatch. Same thing. In the purse snatch, walking down the street, purse over his shoulder, comes and takes the purse off the shoulder and runs. Did I miss anything in that example, Zoe? Okay. Is there any doubt that property was taken? No. There's color anyway. No, property was taken. They ran away with it, so we know they moved it away. It wasn't their purse, we know that. We're gonna have the same dilemma, so, and they didn't come back to give it back. So we still have, let's talk about the force of fear. Let's talk about, do we have force of fear? Zoe, what do you think? Do you think there's force of fear?
No.
I'm sorry?
No.
No. So
I was
probably-
walking down and someone
just do I diddy.
yeah,
Video,
walking
yeah.
and, yeah. I'm like, oh no, where's my friend?
Anybody want to argue that there is force? I would listen to it.
I would say there might be a little force. I mean, if you're holding it and someone snatches it from you, you're gonna like be jolted in some kind of way.
Absolutely.
I
And then,
think
like,
it's-
you
go.
you're not correct.
I just think it depends on how aware you are of what's happening.
I like that. In fact, I want to come back to that. I want to hear what you have to say, and then I want to come back to that.
I'm thinking about how, okay, she had the person in hand and everything, person grabbed it, you're full, and then you realize, oh crap, I'm gonna go first.
Fighting back.
Fight back, like that.
Oh man, you guys are reading my mind.
Like, I was fighting back.
Okay. Does anybody have a purse? I'm gonna go over here because it was your example. Do you mind putting the backpack on one shoulder?
Yeah.
Do you mind if I take it off of you when you do that?
No.
Okay, just sling it over one shoulder. All right, and then don't hold it. So I'm taking this and I run away.
Oh.
Did I rob her? In this scenario, thank you. Is there any, nobody wants to say that's robbery yet? It was on her person. I agree with you. But I didn't always, as I was learning the law. A purse snatch, in my mind, when I first started learning robbery law, I was like, it's gotta be a robbery. Force of fear. I forced it off her shoulder and I ran. It's gotta be a robbery, right? Because I read the elements. But no. We have other crimes. We have some more severe crimes, more than just the Herbalife crime. We can still call that, regardless of in some jurisdictions, they have, well, all jurisdictions for the most part have a delineation of what is felony theft versus what is misdemeanor theft. And that delineation is usually a dollar amount. So if this is a $5 stapler and I steal it, petty theft, misdemeanor, minor theft. And if this is a $5,000 stapler and I steal it, now it's felony theft, grand theft, things like that. That's where however, not all delineations are monetary. Some delineations are just based merely on the item itself. Doesn't matter how much the item is worth. Society says that if you steal that item, it's felonious. In many jurisdictions, cars are that. It doesn't matter how much your car is worth. So the jurisdiction can say, oh, if you steal something more than $1,000, it's a felony, and if you steal something under $1,000, it's a misdemeanor. That's what that jurisdiction says. Well, what if you steal a hoopty that's only worth $250? Well, jurisdiction will say it doesn't matter how much that car was worth, just the mere fact that you stole a car, that's going to be felony theft. So not all jurisdictions merely base it on the monetary value, although that's the usual delineation. Guns are another that would get added in that. Doesn't matter if you steal a $200 gun in jurisdictions that have those delineations, just the mere fact that you stole a gun is a felony. Cars, guns, livestock, a lot of times. And then the other one, to make it a felonious in some jurisdictions, is if I steal it from your person. The legal term is dominion and control. You have dominion and control over an item, and I steal it. Unlike my law instructor, who used to say Dominican control. Dominion and control. If you steal it from somebody who has control of it, that's felonious in those jurisdictions that lay that out. So in the scenario that we just did, where I took it off, I slid it off her shoulder, I just snatched it off her shoulder. I didn't want to hurt her shoulder, but I took it off her person. In those jurisdictions, that would still be felonious theft, but still we don't have robbery. And I want to make that clear. Just because we don't check every box on there doesn't mean we don't have a crime, it just means we don't have that crime. Yes?
Now, what happens if you would have caused harm? Like if you would have snatched it from me and I like fell and I'm trying to get it back and.
Well, let's talk about, you're kind of bringing up two different scenarios I want to talk about, so I want to talk about the second one you said. If you're trying to get it back, in fact, a couple people said it. It all depends on how aware you are of it. So, if you grab one of those straps, and I grab a strap, and now we're just fighting on this, and I'm really trying to struggle, and then I rip it out of her hands. I force it out of her hands. Now I'm using force. As opposed to snatching it off of her, regardless of whether or not there's injury involved, because it's an inadvertent injury. You weren't forcing, we're not going to consider that force. That's just a purse snatch, a theft. A theft from person. Still felonious in many jurisdictions, but not necessarily a robbery until there's actually a struggle in which I have to either force it out of your hands. What are my other options? If she's struggling and I can't overcome, she's too strong for me to pull it out of her hands because now she knows I'm trying to take, what can I do?
There.
I could punch you, right? I could pull a gun, I could pull a knife, I could say, I'm going to kill you if you don't let go of this purse. Any of those things. Now we have an absolute robbery. We're using force, threats, fear. But merely taking it off your shoulder, difficult to prove. I don't think there are any other points. I want to make sure there wasn't a point I said I was going to come back to. All right. So those are our elements of robbery. Any questions about why a couple of those were gray and why some were clear? Talk about burglary. Let's define burglary. We said a house can't get robbed in general. We are gonna come back to that, to the exception, to somewhat of a verbal exception to that. But when we think burglary, come over here. Melina, when you think burglary, tell me a story that, wherein a burglary occurs.
You plan to rob a bank, and you go in, rob the bank.
Ah, you got me. Technically, yes. We're still probably gonna investigate the robbery if you go into the bank and commit a robbery, but you did commit a burglary, yes. So I will give you a pass on that. And we'll come back. We'll come back to why that is technically a burglary, yes. Can you tell me a story about how a burglar would, when you think burglary?
Worked for the day, and when I got home at 5:30, I saw that my door was smashed in and my TV was gone.
Okay, and what do you think happened while you were gone?
Someone probably came into it.
Somebody came in, broke your door, it was your door, broke your door, and took your TV. Anybody disagree that's a burglary? I don't. All right, Ms. Bland? Can you think of another burglary story, a scenario?
Maybe breaking the window of the car.
Technically, yes. A car burglary, yeah. Does not fall under, and it depends on the jurisdiction, whether they're gonna call car, but in some jurisdictions, California being one of them, there is such a thing as a car burglary, not necessarily gonna fall under these definitions we're talking about, but absolutely. Breaking the window of a locked car, that's for California jurisdiction, it has to be a locked car, not an unlocked car, regardless if you break the window. You didn't check the handle. So, she said breaking the door down of a house and taking the TV. So here's what we need. We need to understand that burglary is not a completed crime per se. We don't necessarily need that TV to be taken in order for this to be a burglary. We could take that TV out, but we gotta add some things. We're gonna take the TV out, we gotta add something. So what is the very first step? When we picture a burglar, what is the first thing we imagine them doing? Breaking into the house. So how about we simplify that? Because they can break in, but let's see, if you forgot to lock your door when you went to work and you came back at 5 o'clock, and your door, and they just happened to check the handle, and like, oh great, door's unlocked, and they came in and took your TV. You see how a burglary? There is a trespass involved, but would you feel any less victimized if you just forgot to lock your door and somebody came in and took your TV? I will tell you now, we still have a burglary. We'll talk about why in a second. And I want to get away from, although some jurisdictions still use this term, breaking and entering, definitionally, I want to get away from that term, breaking and entering. We can use it if you go to a jurisdiction that uses that term, by all means. I'm not saying that it's wrong, but for the purposes of understanding the definition of burglary, we absolutely do not need the breaking. We do need the entering. So now, just to be clear, there are still some jurisdictions that say it's still called breaking and entering. But in general, burglary, we have to enter. Now, how do we know in that scenario, how do we know that the person wanted the TV? Because they took a TV. There you go. They took the TV, so we know that they wanted to take that TV. Do you think there's any other reason why they came into that house other than to take stuff? They may not have known there was a TV, but they were probably hoping to get something. And somebody mentioned trespass. What is a trespass? Who over here mentioned trespass? What is a trespass?
Entering into someone's property.
Entering, okay.
Going
So when I said the door was unlocked, we called that a trespass despite the fact that they took the TV. If you're taking TVs, you're taking stuff, we have something more than a trespass. So although it is what we called earlier, we said there's other crimes. we talk assault and battery. Assault is a lesser included crime of battery. You have to swing at somebody in order to batter them. So we don't really care about the assault anymore once the battery is completed. Sure, a burglary does involve trespass, but once we have a burglary, we really don't care about the trespass anymore. Same thing, lesser included crime.
What happens if, okay, so like I intend to enter the house to steal something, and then I see like a cop come by or something, and I hurry up and run out. Is that still burglary? Because I intended to steal, but I didn't?
Let's talk about that in a second. So our first thing we need,
Yeah.
we said the very first thing in order to have the elements of burglary is we need to enter. What do we need to enter?
Something property.
Someone's property. If I go to your front yard and take your children's tricycle from the front yard, did I burglarize you?
Yes, because you entered my property.
I stole from you, but I didn't burglarize. We need one more key element. Absolutely stole from you. It is your kid's tricycle, your property. I'm not allowed to have it. I did commit a larceny, but I did not commit a burglary. Why? I didn't enter, well, a home is one, but can I burglarize the school when it's closed at night? I mean, not me personally, because I have a key. Well, I guess
Yeah, you can.
I can't, I'm gonna go back. I can't burglarize the school even though I do work here. But is the school a home?
It's a
No.
building
There we go. We're gonna call it a structure.
structure.
Entering a structure. We already talked about with intent. With intent to what?
To steal.
Commit a theft? Who called that? Commit a theft. We're gonna come back to this, or something else. Okay, nothing, no other else. So we'll stick on that. You can commit a burglary without stealing a thing. In a couple different ways. You can commit a burglary if you never intended to steal anything in a lot of jurisdictions. The most basic definition of burglary is going to be this one right here. Entering a structure with the intent to commit a theft. However, many jurisdictions also throw in a felonious act. What is a felony you can go into a building and do that is not a theft? Sexual assault, there you go. That's, as long as it's a felony sexual assault, there are misdemeanor sexual assaults, but as long as it is a felonious sexual assault, you still have a burglary. Doesn't have to be a sexual assault, any felony. If I enter a structure with the intent to commit some sort of felony fraud, forgery, I don't, if I sneak into a building and sign somebody else's name and then sneak out. Didn't break in, went in. With the intent, I know when I go into that building, I'm going to sign somebody else's name illegally, and then I leave. In that scenario, I entered a structure. I had the intent before I entered to commit a felony. It wasn't a theft. Now, in your scenario, you're a burglar. When you were away at work, they entered your home. Your home is a structure. Your home has at least 3 walls and a roof. They intended to steal, as evidenced by the fact that when they got in there, they took your TV and left. Burglary? Absolutely. Now, in your scenario, you have a scenario wherein somebody got into the home, they saw the police were coming and they fled, right? Why did they go into the home?
Intending to steal something.
They were gonna, okay, so they went in the home knowing that I could steal some stuff that I could sell for drugs later. Something along those lines, right? So in that scenario, is the door locked or unlocked?
They-
The door is unlocked. So they walk by, they check the door's unlocked, and they said, ha, I'm going inside, and I'm gonna steal some stuff, and I'm gonna sell it for drugs. That's, okay. And then when they're inside, they hear sirens, and they say, oh shoot, the police are coming. And they run out the back and never get caught. Did they enter? Is the home a structure? Before they went in, did they have the intent to steal? They had the intent to steal. Regardless of the fact that they took anything, fled, did anything after that. We have a burglary.
How can you prove that though? Can they just say, no, I didn't, I was just went in that house, I was just trespassing, I didn't.
Proving and elements are two different things. So we have to show why that they went in there. Have to interview, show that maybe they tried to take some things, or have them show that why they had a lawful reason to be in there, things like that.
So what would a home invasion be considered?
Let me touch on that in just a second. Don't let me forget that one, because that's my final piece of the lecture. So now, I'll be right there. So we said the door was unlocked. We said, and I think we've already touched on this, but I want to reiterate, if the door is locked or unlocked, the windows are open, the windows are closed. They smash a window, they lift a window. There are no windows. They just built a house with no windows. It just has holes in the wall. Those all don't matter. Irrelevant. You enter a structure. You don't break into a structure. You enter a structure with the intent to commit a felony or a theft. That's all the elements you need. If this is, we're gonna call this room a structure just for this purpose. Or excuse me, I'm gonna call the hallway a structure. All right, we're outside. I'm telling you guys right now, when I go in there, when I go into this building, I'm going to steal a computer. I know there's computers out there. I know there's laptops right in there. I'm going to steal it. I'm going to steal these laptops because I can sell them for a lot of money. You know what? I changed my mind. Did I enter? Was that a structure? Before I entered, did I have the intent to commit a felony or theft? Am I a burglar? Absolutely. Absolutely. If I reach for this and I say, I'm gonna steal these laptops that are in here. I'm going to steal those laptops as soon as I get in there. Oh shoot, there's the cops. Did I have intent? Absolutely. What was my intent? To steal. I had the intent to steal. Did I enter a structure?
No.
No. Do we have a crime? What kind of crime do we have?
Give us the right to communicate, right?
I would call that an attempted burglary. I got dangerously close, an incomplete, inchoate crime.
Is that like the lower?
Yeah, usually there's a lower exposure to an attempted crime. The legal exposure is usually the same, but the sentencing guidelines probably could be lesser. So we would call this, what if it's locked? I can't get in, never mind. Probably still a 10, but I never entered. We talked about car burglaries. Some jurisdictions call it a car burglary. Technically, a car is not a structure. I'm not sure why they structure the wording that way to call it a burglary from a motor vehicle, but in those situations, they still call it a burglary from a motor vehicle with different definitions. So don't confuse that we don't normally call vehicles structures, but for some reason they still call that. How about this? So yeah, this building, the public safety building is a structure. If I got here this morning and then I came to class and I realized that Mrs. Sullivan left her $5,000 stapler here, too bad for her. That's my $5,000 stapler now, and I steal it. Did I enter a structure this morning? Yes. When I entered that structure, before I entered that structure, I had the intent to commit a felony or theft. No. Did I commit a felony or theft?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I didn't have the intent when I entered the structure, so it is not a burglary. You can commit a theft inside a structure and have it not be a burglary if you did not formulate that intent before you got in.
How do you prove someone's intent though? Like, what if they just never admit it? They're just like, oh yeah, I found the stapler. You got it. But in reality, they were like, before they entered the structure, they're like, I'm gonna steal that.
It'd be very difficult to prove. Let me give you a scenario where we make it a little easier. How about a shoplifter? Let's talk about shoplifter. I always talk about Bubs. We go to Bubs, and I bring a special bag that I have. I've got a bag that's lined with a special material that no matter how many of those sensors I put in there, as long as I close it, it won't set off the sensor alarm when I walk out. Some would call that a booster bag. So I take that bag. You looking for it on Amazon right now?
No, I was like, did they make, I didn't know they make that.
Depending on the technology's gotten a lot better, but back in the day, there were bags where you could line it with stuff and it's the old sensors as well. So we'll live in the past for a minute. I'm gonna take my booster bag in. Because I know that I could put a bunch of stuff in that bag and I could walk right out and those sensors aren't gonna go off. So so I get it out of my pocket in the parking lot. I get my bag out of the trunk, get it nice and, you know what, actually I'm gonna fold it up, put it in my pocket so they don't see me with it when I walk in. Because I don't want to get caught. I know there's a bunch of good stuff in there to steal. And I don't want them to stop me until I get it. I don't want to stop me at all, but I definitely don't want to stop me on the way in. So I put it in my pocket. And then when I get over to the, I need some slacks. So I'm gonna go to the slack section and pull the bag out and start putting some slacks. I'm not gonna bother taking the sensors off because I know they're not gonna go off when I leave. Get about a half a dozen nice khakis. Because pimping ain't easy. And I close that bag up and I carry it out. Get a little nervous because I get the sensors, but I know it's probably not gonna go off. I walk past the registers, I see them. And I get to the door. And it doesn't go off, and I walk out, put the bag in my car, and I drive away. Did I shoplift? No doubt. No doubt I shoplifted. Did I enter a structure during this story? Entered a structure. Before I went into that structure, what was my intent? I knew I was going to steal. I had my booster bag. If I got caught, the investigator could easily prove that I had the intent to steal. Why? Because I brought my own booster bag. But the only reason for that bag to be lined with those fabrics is to hide sensors. So it's very easy to prove what my intent was before. I don't need to tell them. They know what a booster bag is. So the investigators, if I got caught in this scenario, instead of getting out, loss prevention stops me and they call the police. I entered a structure with the intent to commit a theft. I committed a shoplifting, but what else did I commit? Surprise, I'm a burglar. I'm a burglar of an open business by that definition.
Okay, so my mom, she works at Dwayne's and she's like a big manager or whatever. So they had a scenario where they had a mother come in and she had her toddler in the stroller, like get stuff and keep them like behind it and everything and end up walking out or whatever. Well, they ended up catching her on surveillance. And she was like, I didn't know that he had it.
Oh my God.
So how would you do that?
It's difficult. Not every crime is, not every intent is provable. And that's why we talk about crimes in a vacuum. I tell you, if you know their intent, then it fits this element. And sometimes when I give examples, I'll say, I have a note in my pocket that tells you exactly what I intended to do. Because not every crime can be proven. Intent is a state of mind, and it's very difficult to prove. Sometimes, you have a booster bag, it's easy to prove. Or a reasonable person would assume that if I go into a stranger's home while they're at work, probably had the intent to steal. However, if I wake up in the middle of the night and there's somebody in my home asleep on my couch, drunk, someone would call that a burglar. I've got a burglar in my house. But do I? Or do I have a drunk guy who came and got in the wrong house that I forgot to lock my front door and they came in the wrong house and fell asleep on my couch?
That happened to me actually in college in my dorm. some kid just came up and crashed on my roommate's bed. It was just scary.
We've gotten calls like that where folks have a burglar. We call it a hot prowl because burglaries usually happen, like Leanna described, where they're not home. If somebody is home, it's upgraded and it's a more serious call. Why do burglaries happen during the day when nobody's home?
Because it's attempted, like, usually, people might consider like, oh, attempted. Not attempted. It could become deadly.
Yeah.
It can become deadly, because one, you have, you might go to somebody's house and have to.
There. So you don't want to get caught, right? That's the primary motivation for daytime burglaries is that folks are at work and burglars in general don't want to be caught. It's not a confrontation crime, like snatching a purse or robbing a gas station. Those are confrontation crimes. Burglary, in general, folks don't want to be confronted with anybody because of those consequences. However,
They don't want to intend harm on anyone. They don't want to.
they just want to steal some stuff.
Yeah.
I forgot I had a drink up there. You guys didn't remind me. Said you're getting parched. I did it well. Apparently, I did it for myself.
But I would have done. Let's say, hypothetically, I went to the Sheets, right?
Okay.
And carried all tractor and everything. I got the Red Bull, right? And I put it on pocket. I'm like, I'm gonna buy this like later or might not. And then I leave with the Red Bull in my pocket.
Okay.
What's that considered?
Let's go down the elements. Look at the first one. Did you take anything? This is my imaginary checklist for robbery. Did you take anything?
Yes.
Did you take it from somebody, the Sheets,
Yes.
somebody or something? Through the use of force or fear?
No.
No? And then we don't really care then if there's no intent to permanently deprive because as long as we're missing one element. Burglary. Did you enter the Sheets?
Mhm.
Is the Sheets a structure?
Yes.
Before you entered that structure, before you opened that door, did you have the intent to steal a Red Bull? That doesn't really matter what you did when you went inside.
You know, accidentally sold it. It's like,
Did you still steal it?
So that, right?
Is it still, yeah, it's still theft, but it's not gonna be either one of the crimes that we're talking about today.
Okay.
It's not gonna be a robbery, it's not gonna be a burglary. It's still taking the property of another with the intent to permanently deprive, moving away the property of another with the intent to permanently deprive is still a crime. The crime of larceny, theft, petty, grand, however you describe it. If it's a $5,000 Red Bull, then it'd be grand theft. If it's a 2-cent Red Bull, it'd be petty theft, and depending on the jurisdiction, somewhere in between.
I forgot it was a pocket.
Allegedly.
But yeah.
So what, is the definition of theft and larceny? Is it two different?
No, there's two words for the same crime in general for most jurisdictions. Some jurisdictions call it larceny, some jurisdictions call it theft.
Okay,
The taking and moving away of the property of another with the intent to permanently deprive.
okay.
And then again, the intent to permanently deprive is jurisdictionally dependent. Home invasion. We already said that our house can't get robbed. I started off the lecture today saying that the house can't get robbed, but very, very limited exception. When you say home invasion, what do you think? Tell me a story of a home invasion. Give me an example.
I think someone entering the home uninvited and.
You said uninvited?
Yeah,
Okay.
not necessarily stealing anything, just kind of like, almost like a squatter, I guess you could say.
Okay,
Like.
that is a crime.
Like in a bag or something, or, any kind of entry without stealing anything.
That sounds a lot like trespass over here.
Mhm.
What you're describing. I would not categorize that as a home invasion.
Mhm.
Because in order for us to have a home invasion, the actual definition of a home invasion is something different. So what you're describing, a squatter, somebody uninvited who just refuses to leave, living in a vacant property sometime or in an attic, so trespass.
Mhm.
Still a crime, not a burglary necessarily, and not a robbery, but yes.
But you said that home invasion is brought about by like a group of robbers, so like they're taking stuff. And home invasion is like when there's people in the house, so they hold them there while they're taking stuff. Is that what home invasion is basically?
Yeah, in general, absolutely. So we don't even need a group, but yeah, that would be an example. So in order for us to have a home, what we colloquially call a home invasion, you really just need one more word to define that. It's a home invasion robbery. A home invasion, you'll hear it called a home invasion, is literally a home invasion robbery or a robbery at a residence. A robbery that occurs at a residence is a home invasion robbery. So we said at the beginning, you can't have, your house can't get robbed. So let's talk about what we need in order to have a home invasion robbery. There's one very key element that we'll need to change it from a burglary to a robbery. Force or fear. Can the house be forced or can the house be scared? What do we need? So in Leanne's situation, we had you're at home or you're at work, nobody's home, they came in and took the TV. Can't have a home invasion robbery if nobody's home. No, if nobody's there to be scared or forced, you cannot have a home invasion robbery. You have burglary. Yes, you have burglary. Now, if somebody is home, doesn't guarantee we have doesn't guarantee that we have a home invasion robbery. In Leanne's situation, if she was upstairs asleep and somebody came in and took her TV and left, do we have a burglary? Do we have a robbery? We have a burglary, we don't have a robbery. Why in that situation was Leanne not robbed? Because she wasn't forced and she wasn't scared. She was asleep, had no idea what's happening. Now that's an extreme example. You don't have to be asleep. You can be in another room, just not know what's happening. You could watch the person do it and just not care. I mean, you want to talk about an extreme example. Now let's put Leanne on her living room couch, watching that TV. Somebody walks up to the door, walks in, sneaks by, sees her on the couch, is startled, and says, well, I'm already here, I might as well take the TV. And she's watching TV, she watches them take it. I don't care. They take her TV and they walk out. Did she get robbed? Did they use force or fear to take her TV? No. When they entered her structure, did they have the intent to steal?
Yes.
She got burglarized while watching it happen. That's an extreme example. I've never heard of that happening, but I wanted to drive home the point. You can, just because somebody is home doesn't mean it's a robbery. Now, how do we turn that story with her on the couch, somebody turn that into a robbery?
Give me your TV.
There we go. Another point. Comes in, sees her on the couch, give me your TV, or I'm taking your TV. Now, is a reasonable person going to be scared? Yeah. Now we have entering, doesn't matter we entered a structure. Doesn't matter that there was 3 walls and a roof. Just the mere fact that you went into a home and used force or fear to take somebody else's property with intent to permanently deprive. You have a robbery inside a residence, it's home invasion. Now, the jurisdictions are going to be different as far as if there's going to be a different penal code for that. In some jurisdictions, a home invasion robbery may have a different numerical section. You may have robbery be 211 of the penal code, and then home invasion robbery might be 212. Or it could just be robbery. Maybe a jurisdiction doesn't differentiate. You commit a robbery at a business, you commit a robbery at a house, it doesn't matter. It's all robbery. Now, you guys know what a beer run is? A beer run? We're supposed to go into like the sheets and grab a case of beer and run out. The bad kind. Insert. So we'll call it, on the street, call that a beer run. Go into, you know, you're going to go in and grab the beer and run out. In that scenario, do we have a burglary?
Yes.
Okay. It's going to be difficult to prove, probably, that there's burglary. Why is it going to be difficult to prove? I told you the elements, but what elements going to be difficult to prove?
Intent.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to prove intent.
Well, I mean, if you're caught on video running straight to the beer running out, there's that.
Yeah,
But they may not be running it literally. They may casually stroll in, walk around,
yeah.
wait for their buddy to move the car around, take the beer, casually look at the register, and just walk out, and then once they get outside, they run. In that scenario, did they probably plan that out? Yeah, probably. It's gonna be very difficult. So at the very least, do we have a theft? Did they take the property of another with the intent to permanently deprive? Yeah. Now, I'm gonna add one difference to that scenario. The cashier is tired of the beer runs. Tired, these guys come in every week. They're stealing this $20 case of beer, and he's getting poured $20 at a time. They said, no more. He sees the guy come in, grabs the beer, starts to walk out past the cashier. Cashier jumps over the counter and grabs the beer, and now they're struggling over it. They're struggling over it, and the guy taking the beer, dots him in the eye, takes the beer, runs away. Yeah, you just turned a shoplifting, you turned a misdemeanor, petty theft, a $20 theft, into a prison robbery with one bad decision. Because he was forced to take that $20. It doesn't matter the amount. Robbery is robbery. There is no threshold in most jurisdictions. There may be a sentencing threshold, like if you commit a robbery that results in this much, you're gonna get this exposure, but it's still a robbery, it's still a felony. So it turned a $20 misdemeanor beer theft into a prison eligible robbery with one punch. That's how we implement those elements. Yes.
So I have a question about going back to the purse situation.
Okay.
What is considered mugging?
Mugging, in general, falls under one of the categories of robbery. We can commit robberies. We can do home invasions. We can do commercial. We can do what we described here once we turned yours into a robbery, where we did it on the street. Home invasion, 3 categories of robbery: home invasion, commercial, and street robberies. Street robberies are casually named muggings.